The Lagos traffic was at a standstill when Adunni Bakare stepped out of her black Range Rover, her designer heels clicking against the wet asphalt of Victoria Island. 25 years had passed since that terrible night when the muddy waters of the Ogun River almost claimed her life. Now, standing before the towering glass building that housed Bakare Holdings, she wasn't the broken 17-year-old girl who had been pushed into those dark waters by her stepmother. She was a billionaire businesswoman, and she had come home for one purpose: revenge. What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from. Her phone buzzed with a message from her private investigator. Folake Bakare is at the Radisson Blu having lunch with the governor's wife. Table 12, terrace level. Adunni's lips curved into a cold smile. Her stepmother still lived the high life, still played the role of the grieving widow who had lost her stepdaughter in a tragic accident all those years ago. But Folake had no idea that the girl she thought was dead had not only survived but had built an empire that could crush everything she held dear. The domestic betrayal that started it all flashed through Adunni's mind like a movie reel. She remembered walking into her father's study that night, looking for him to discuss her university admission letter, only to find Folake wrapped in the arms of Uncle Tund, her father's business partner and best friend. "You little spy," Folake had hissed when she saw Adunni frozen in the doorway. "You think you can ruin everything I've worked for?" That confrontation had led to the chase through the dark streets of Ikoyi, ending at the bridge over the Ogun River where Folake's desperate shove had sent Adunni tumbling into the churning waters below. The current had carried her downstream, but a fisherman's net had saved her life. She'd spent months recovering in a small village, plotting her return. Now, adjusting her gold Ankara headwrap, Adunni walked through the marble lobby of the hotel. She had arranged this meeting carefully. Folake thought she was meeting with a potential investor from South Africa about a charity project. Instead, she would come face to face with the ghost of her past. The elevator doors opened on the terrace level, and Adunni saw her immediately. Folake sat with her back to the entrance, her signature laugh echoing across the restaurant as she entertained her companion. At 58, she was still striking, her skin smooth from expensive treatments, her hair perfectly styled in a low bun. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Adunni approached slowly, savoring the moment. When she reached the table, she cleared her throat softly. "Good afternoon, Mama Folake." Folake turned around, and the blood drained from her face. The wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Her companion, Mrs. Adebayo, looked confused as Folake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But you're..." Folake stammered, her hand flying to her chest. "Dead," Adunni finished, pulling out the chair across from her stepmother and sitting down gracefully. "I can see why you might think that. After all, you did push me into the river 25 years ago." Mrs. Adebayo gasped, looking between the two women. "Folake, what is she talking about?" But Folake couldn't speak. She was staring at Adunni as if she was seeing a ghost, which in many ways, she was. The girl she had tried to kill had grown into a formidable woman, more beautiful than she had ever been, with a kind of confidence that only came from surviving the impossible. "I know what you're thinking," Adunni said, her voice calm and measured. "How did I survive? How did I build all this?" She gestured to her expensive clothes, her jewelry, the aura of success that surrounded her. "Well, that's a story for another day. Today, we need to talk about what happens next." Folake found her voice, though it came out as a whisper. "What do you want?" Adunni leaned forward, her eyes glittering with 25 years of suppressed rage. "I want everything you stole from me. Everything you took when you killed my father." The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mrs. Adebayo excused herself hastily, sensing the danger in the atmosphere. Folake watched her friend leave, then turned back to Adunni with desperate eyes. "Your father died of a heart attack," she said weakly. You know that. Did he? Dunny's smile was razor-sharp. Because my private investigators found something very interesting in your medicine cabinet from 1999. Digitalis. Quite a lot of it, actually. Funny thing about heart medication. Too much of it can cause a heart attack in a perfectly healthy man. Folake's face went ashen. The secret she had guarded for 25 years, the murder she thought she had gotten away with, was about to destroy everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope about to snap. Folake's hands trembled as she reached for her purse, but Dunny was faster, placing her own hand over her stepmother's. Not so fast, Dunny said softly. We're not done talking. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the terrace, and the usual bustle of Lagos traffic seemed muted up here in the clouds. Folake looked older suddenly, the weight of her secrets aging her before Dunny's eyes. You have no proof, Folake whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Dunny pulled out her phone and showed her stepmother a photograph. It was a medicine bottle, clearly labeled with Folake's name and a Digitalis prescription from 1999. This was found in a safety deposit box your late husband rented under a false name. Amazing what people keep as insurance, isn't it? The color drained completely from Folake's face. Chief Becker had known. Somehow, her husband had discovered her infidelity with his best friend and her plan to poison him. But he had died before he could expose her. He was going to divorce me, Folake said quietly, her shoulders sagging with defeat. Everything would have gone to you. I would have had nothing. So you killed him and tried to kill me too. Dunny's voice was steady, but inside, her heart was pounding with the vindication she had waited decades to feel. Tell me, Mama Folake, how did it feel to watch me fall into that river? Folake closed her eyes, the memory playing out behind her lids. I never meant for it to go that far. I just wanted to scare you, make you promise to keep quiet about what you saw. But you kept backing away, and then you tripped. I didn't trip, Dunny said coldly. You pushed me. I remember your hands on my chest, the look in your eyes. You wanted me dead. The confession hung between them like smoke. Folake opened her eyes, and for a moment, Dunny saw something that might have been remorse. But it was quickly replaced by the calculating look she remembered from her childhood. What do you want? Folake asked again, this time with more composure. Money. I'll give you money. Dunny laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Money. Do you have any idea who I am now? I own 3 mining companies in Ghana, a shipping empire that spans from Cape Town to Cairo, and real estate in every major African city. Your little inheritance from my father is pocket change to me now. She leaned back in her chair, studying her stepmother's face. No, I don't want your money. I want something much more valuable. What? I want you to feel what I felt. The betrayal, the fear, the helplessness. I want you to lose everything, piece by piece, just like you tried to take everything from me. Folake's eyes narrowed. Despite her fear, the woman who had murdered her husband and attempted to kill his daughter was still there, calculating her next move. You can't prove anything. That medicine bottle means nothing without witnesses, and everyone who was there that night is dead. Dunny smiled. Not everyone. She pulled out her phone again and played a video. The screen showed a hospital room, and in the bed lay an elderly man hooked up to various machines. But his eyes were alert, and when he began to speak, Folake's blood turned to ice. My name is Dr. Emeka Okafor, the man on the screen said in a weak but clear voice. In 1999, I was the attending physician when Chief Becker died. Mrs. Folake Becker asked me to falsify the cause of death. She said she would pay me handsomely and ensure my son got a scholarship to study abroad. I was young and desperate, so I agreed. The video continued with the doctor detailing exactly how the cause of death had been changed from digitalis poisoning to heart attack, how the blood samples had been switched, how the whole thing had been covered up. He's been living with the guilt for 25 years, Adunni said, stopping the video. Cancer has a way of making people want to clean their consciences before they meet their maker. Folake stared at the blank phone screen, her world crumbling around her. You can't do this to me. I'm a pillar of this community. I run 3 charities. I'm respected. Were you thinking about respect when you were in Uncle Tun's arms in my father's study? Adunni asked. Were you thinking about charity when you pushed a 17-year-old girl into a river? The waiter approached their table, having noticed the broken glass, but Adunni waved him away with a gesture that spoke of long-held authority. When they were alone again, she continued. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, Dr. Okafor's confession will be delivered to the police. By tomorrow evening, you'll be arrested for the murder of my father. Your assets will be frozen pending investigation. Your reputation will be in ruins. Folake's breathing became shallow. Please, she whispered. I'm an old woman. I have grandchildren. So did the families of the people your charities were supposed to help. How much of that money actually reached them, I wonder. My investigators are very thorough. The implication hit Folake like a physical blow. Her charity work, the thing she was most proud of, had been another lie. She had been skimming money for years, using her reputation to fund her luxurious lifestyle. But as Adunni watched her stepmother crumble, she saw something flicker in the older woman's eyes. A spark of the cunning that had kept her secret safe for 25 years. You think you've won, Folake said quietly, but you don't know everything. You don't know about the others. What others? Folake smiled for the first time since Adunni had appeared. Your father wasn't the only one who stood in my way. And you're not the only child who went missing that year. The blood in Adunni's veins turned cold. What are you talking about? Ask yourself this, my dear stepdaughter, Folake said, rising from her chair with renewed confidence. If I could make a grown man disappear with poison, and nearly make you disappear in a river, what makes you think you were my only victims? She gathered her purse and stood, looking down at Adunni for the first time in 25 years. Enjoy your revenge while it lasts. But remember, some secrets have secrets of their own. With that she walked away, leaving Adunni sitting alone at the table, her mind reeling with new questions that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew about that terrible night. What do you think Folake is hiding? Drop a comment with your theories, and don't forget to share this story with someone who loves a good revenge plot. Adunni sat alone on the terrace for 20 minutes after Folake left, her mind racing through the implications of her stepmother's parting words. The Lagos skyline stretched out before her, but she barely saw it. Instead, she was thinking about 1999, about the other children in their social circle who had gone missing or died under mysterious circumstances. There was Kemi Adebola, the daughter of her father's rival in the textile business, who had supposedly drowned at a beach party. And Sono Gundamu, son of a prominent politician, who had died in what was ruled a car accident just weeks before her father's death. At the time, everyone had mourned these tragic losses as terrible coincidences. But what if they weren't coincidences at all? Her phone rang, interrupting her dark thoughts. The caller ID showed her assistant's name. Adunni, the meeting with the Johannesburg investors has been moved to tomorrow, Amara said. Also, there's been a development. The private investigator you have watching Mrs. Becker says she didn't go home after leaving the hotel. She went to see someone at a private clinic in Ikoyi. Who? Dr. Sarah Ogundimu. The name hit Adunni like a thunderbolt. Ogundimu. The same last name as Son, the boy who had died in the car accident. This couldn't be a coincidence. Find out everything you can about this Dr. Ogundamu, Adunni instructed. And get me the files on all the children who died or went missing in Lagos between 1998 and 2000. I want names, dates, family connections, everything. She hung up and immediately called her driver. If Folake was visiting this doctor, there had to be a reason. And if Adunni's growing suspicions were correct, this Dr. Ogundamu might hold the key to secrets that went much deeper than her father's murder. The drive to Ikoyi took 45 minutes through Lagos traffic. Adunni used the time to research Dr. Sarah Ogundamu on her tablet. The woman was a psychiatrist who ran a private practice specializing in trauma therapy. She was also, according to the records Amara had quickly pulled up, the older sister of Son Ogundamu, the boy who had died in 1999. The clinic was housed in a converted colonial mansion, its white walls and blue shutters giving it an air of calm respectability. Adunni waited in her car across the street until she saw Folake emerge from the building. Her stepmother looked shaken, her usually perfect composure cracked around the edges. After Folake's car disappeared into traffic, Adunni walked into the clinic. The receptionist, a young woman in her 20s, looked up from her computer with a professional smile. "I'd like to see Dr. Ogundamu," Adunni said. "It's urgent. Do you have an appointment?" Adunni placed a business card on the desk. The receptionist's eyes widened when she read the name and title. Everyone in Lagos knew who Adunni Bakare was, even if they didn't know her full story. "I'll see if the doctor is available," the young woman said, reaching for her phone. 5 minutes later, Adunni found herself in Dr. Ogundamu's office, a peaceful space filled with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. The doctor herself was a woman in her early 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a simple bun and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ms. Bakare," Dr. Ogundamu said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I must admit, I'm surprised to see you. When Mrs. Folake told me you were alive, I could hardly believe it." So Folake had told her about their encounter. Adunni settled into the chair, studying the doctor's face for any sign of deception. "She told you about me?" "She told me many things, including the truth about what happened 25 years ago." Dr. Ogundamu leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "She's been my patient for 15 years, you know. Ever since the guilt began eating her alive." "Guilt?" Adunni couldn't hide her surprise. "Folake doesn't strike me as someone capable of guilt. You'd be surprised what people are capable of feeling, even when they've convinced themselves they're not capable of feeling it." The doctor paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. "She came to me originally because she was having nightmares. About water. About drowning. About children's voices calling for help." Adunni's heart skipped a beat. "Children's voices? Plural." Dr. Ogundamu nodded slowly. "Your stepmother has been carrying the weight of multiple secrets, Ms. Bakare. Your attempted murder was just one of them. Tell me about your brother." The change in the doctor's expression was subtle but unmistakable. Pain flickered across her features before she composed herself. "Son was 21 when he died. Bright, ambitious, studying engineering at the University of Lagos. He was also asking too many questions about certain business dealings his father was involved in with Chief Bakare." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that could have exposed a money laundering operation that involved several prominent Lagos families, including yours." Adunni felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Her father, the man she had idealized and mourned for 25 years, had been involved in criminal activities. And children had died to keep those activities secret. Son discovered that several of his father's political contacts were using their businesses to wash money from drug trafficking and illegal arms deals, Dr. Ogundamu continued. "He was young and idealistic. He thought he could expose them and be a hero. Instead, he ended up dead. Instead, He ended up in a car with faulty brakes on a rainy night, driving down a hill that he'd driven safely hundreds of times before. The doctor's voice was steady, but Adunni could hear the years of suppressed grief beneath it. "And you think Folake was involved?" "I think Folake was the coordinator. The one who decided which children posed a threat and how to eliminate them." Dr. Ogundamu stood up and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. "She's been confessing to me piece by piece over the years, thinking that doctor-patient privilege would protect her secrets forever." She handed the folder to Adunni. 12 children, all from prominent families, all dead or missing between 1998 and 2000. All killed because they knew too much or were in the way of someone's ambitions. Adunni opened the folder with shaking hands. The first page contained a list of names, dates, and brief descriptions of deaths. Car accidents, drownings, mysterious illnesses, disappearances. A systematic elimination of an entire generation of young people who might have grown up to expose the corruption of their elders. "Why are you telling me this?" Adunni asked, looking up from the horrifying list. "Why break doctor-patient privilege now?" Dr. Ogundamu smiled sadly. "Because Folake is dying, Ms. Becker. She has perhaps 6 months to live. And because she's made it clear that she intends to take you with her when she goes." The words hit Adunni like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "She didn't just come here today to confess. She came to ask me for help with one final plan. She wants to stage her own suicide and frame you for her murder. Her final act of revenge against the girl who survived when she was supposed to die." Adunni stared at the doctor in shock. Even now, even with death approaching, Folake was still plotting, still trying to destroy her. "There's something else," Dr. Ogundamu said quietly. "Something she doesn't know that I know. You're not the only survivor from that year." "What do you mean?" The doctor walked to her window, looking out at the bustling street below. "One of the children on that list, a girl named Zainab Musa, wasn't actually killed. She was sold to human traffickers operating out of Kono. I've been trying to find her for 20 years. Adunni's mind reeled. Another survivor. Another victim of Folake's murderous ambitions who might still be alive somewhere. "I know this is overwhelming," Dr. Ogundamu said, turning back to face her. "But if you truly want revenge against Folake, you need to know the full scope of what she's done. And you need to know that she's not planning to go quietly." Adunni looked down at the folder in her hands, at the names of 12 children who had been murdered to protect the secrets of their elders. Her own name should have been on that list. Instead, she was here, alive and powerful enough to finally bring justice to them all. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Dr. Ogundamu smiled. "I need you to help me find Zainab. And I need you to help me stop Folake from claiming any more victims." As if summoned by their conversation, Adunni's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Enjoyed our lunch? Don't get too comfortable. The game isn't over. F." Adunni showed the message to Dr. Ogundamu, who shook her head grimly. "She's already started. We don't have much time." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of phone calls and planning. Adunni returned to her penthouse apartment in Victoria Island, a glass-walled sanctuary 40 floors above the chaos of Lagos streets. But tonight, the city lights that usually calmed her felt like watching eyes, and every sound made her jump. Dr. Ogundamu had given her copies of all the files, along with a warning that chilled her to the bone. Folake had asked about obtaining untraceable poisons during their session. The woman was dying, but she clearly intended to take others with her before she went. Adunni spread the files across her dining table, studying the faces of the dead children. They had all been so young, so full of promise. Kemi Adebola, who had wanted to be a lawyer like her father. Tund Fashola, who had dreams of becoming a doctor. Son Ogundamu, the engineering student who had stumbled onto his father's money laundering scheme. And at the bottom of the pile, a school photograph of a girl with bright eyes and a shy smile. Zainab Musa, daughter of a prominent Kano businessman who had been investigating illegal mining operations. According to the file, she had disappeared from a school trip to Abuja in 1999. Her body was never found. Aduni's phone rang, startling her from her dark thoughts. The caller ID showed her head of security. "Ma'am, we have a problem," Marcus said without preamble. "Someone tried to break into your office building tonight. They didn't get far, but they left something behind." "What kind of something?" "A package addressed to you. The bomb squad cleared it. It's not explosive, but you're going to want to see what's inside." 20 minutes later, Aduni stood in her corporate office, staring at the contents of a small wooden box. Inside was a child's bracelet, tarnished silver with a small charm in the shape of a butterfly. Attached to it was a note in Folake's distinctive handwriting. "She screamed your name when they took her. Just like you screamed mine when you fell." Dr. Ogundamu, who had arrived shortly after Aduni called her, examined the bracelet with shaking hands. This was Zainab's. She never took it off. Her mother gave it to her for her 10th birthday. The cruelty of the gesture was breathtaking. Even dying, Folake was finding ways to twist the knife, to cause maximum psychological damage. But she had also made a mistake. She had confirmed that Zainab had been alive when she was taken, and that she had somehow known about Aduni's survival. "We need to find her," Aduni said quietly. "Zainab. If she's still alive." "She is." The voice came from the doorway, where a tall man in his 40s stood silhouetted against the hallway lights. Aduni's security team moved to intercept him, but he held up his hands peacefully. "My name is Ibrahim Musa," he said. "Zainab is my sister." Dr. Ogundamu gasped. "You're supposed to be dead. The file said you died in a car accident in 2001. Ibrahim smiled grimly. "The same people who killed the others tried to kill me too. But I was luckier than most. I survived, went underground, and I've been searching for Zainab ever since." He walked into the room, and Aduni could see the family resemblance to the girl in the photograph. Same eyes, same determined jawline. But where Zainab had looked innocent and hopeful, Ibrahim carried the weight of years spent in the shadows. "I know where she is," he continued. "And I know what Folake is planning." Aduni felt her heart stop. "Where is she?" Zainab was sold to a trafficking ring that supplied girls to wealthy men across West Africa. But she wasn't kept as a slave. She was too smart, too valuable. They trained her as an assassin. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Aduni sank into her chair, trying to process what she was hearing. The innocent girl in the photograph had been turned into a killer. "She's been working for them for 20 years, Ibrahim continued. "Taking contracts, eliminating targets, sending money back to the organization. But she never forgot who put her there. And she never forgot the other children who died." Dr. Ogundamu was staring at Ibrahim with a mixture of hope and horror. "Are you saying she's been planning revenge all this time?" "I'm saying she's been planning to come home. And Folake's illness has given her the perfect opportunity." Aduni's phone buzzed with another message. This time, the photo that accompanied it made her blood run cold. It was a recent surveillance photo of her taken outside the hotel that afternoon, but someone had drawn a red X across her face. The message read, "3 days. Then we finish what we started. Both of you." The butterfly. "Zainab," Dr. Ogundamu whispered, recognizing the signature reference to the charm bracelet. Ibrahim nodded grimly. "She calls herself that now. The butterfly. Beautiful but deadly. She's been contracted to kill both you and Folake, to tie up all the loose ends from 1999. Contracted by whom? By the same people who ordered the death of the other children. The corruption network that your father and the other parents were part of. They're still out there, still powerful, and they can't afford to have survivors talking about what happened 25 years ago. Adunni felt the walls closing in around her. She had thought she was the hunter, stalking Folake for revenge. But she was actually the prey, caught in a web of corruption and murder that stretched back decades and reached into the highest levels of Nigerian society. There's more, Ibrahim said quietly. Folake isn't dying naturally. Zainab has been poisoning her slowly for months, using the same methods Folake used on your father. She wanted her to suffer, to know what was coming. The revelation was staggering. While Adunni had been planning her elaborate revenge, another survivor had already been executing hers. Zainab had been playing a longer game, and now she was ready to end it permanently. Can we find her? Adunni asked. Can we stop her? Ibrahim looked at her with something that might have been pity. You can try. But understand, she's not the little girl who was taken anymore. She's a killer with nothing left to lose and 25 years of rage driving her forward. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Adunni. If you really want to survive this, meet me tomorrow at the address on that card. But know that once you go down this path, there's no coming back. You'll learn things about your father, about your family, about yourself that you won't be able to unknow. With that cryptic warning, he turned and walked out, leaving Adunni and Dr. Ogundimu alone with the terrible knowledge of what was coming. Adunni looked at the card in her hand. The address was for a warehouse in Apapa, Lagos's industrial district. Not the kind of place for a casual meeting. What are you going to do? Dr. Ogundimu asked. Adunni stared at the photograph of Zainab, at the innocent face of the girl who had become a killer. I'm going to find her. And I'm going to try to save us all. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was already too late. The butterfly was coming home, and she was bringing death with her. The warehouse in Apapa smelled of rust and diesel fumes from the nearby port. Adunni arrived at dawn, as Ibrahim had instructed, bringing only her most trusted bodyguard, Chidi. The morning mist from Lagos Lagoon hung in the air like a shroud, and the sounds of ships' horns echoed across the water. Ibrahim was waiting inside, but he wasn't alone. 3 other men stood in the shadows, and Adunni immediately recognized the tension of people who had spent years living on the edge of danger. These were survivors too, she realized. Other children who had escaped the systematic murders of 1999. Welcome to the Resurrection Club, Ibrahim said with bitter humor. We're all supposed to be dead. The tallest of the 3 men stepped forward. I'm David Kalu. My father was the banker who handled the money laundering for your father's group. I supposedly died in a house fire in 2000. The second man, shorter but with intelligent eyes, nodded to her. Ahmed Bello. My father was the customs official who let the illegal shipments through. I allegedly drowned at Tarqua Bay. The third man remained silent until Ibrahim nudged him forward. This is Peter Okoye. His father was the police commissioner who covered up the crimes. He's been mute since they tried to kill him with acid. But he's the best tracker any of us have ever seen. Adunni looked around at these men, all roughly her age, all bearing the invisible scars of surviving attempted murder. How many of us are there? 7 that we know of, Ibrahim answered. You, us 4, and 2 others who moved to Europe and want nothing to do with revenge. But there should have been 13. Zainab. Zainab was taken instead of killed because she was the prettiest, David said bluntly. The trafficking contact thought she'd be worth more alive than dead. But they underestimated what 25 years of rage and professional killer training would create. Ahmed spread a map of Lagos on a makeshift table constructed from oil drums and plywood. Red circles marked various locations across the city. She's been here for 3 weeks, we think. Moving between safe houses, studying her targets, planning her endgame. "Have you seen her?" Adani asked. Ibrahim shook his head. "She doesn't want to be seen. But she's left calling cards at each location she's surveilled. Always the same thing, a dead butterfly pinned to a photograph of her intended victim." He handed Adani a plastic evidence bag containing a black butterfly and a photo of herself leaving her office building the previous day. The precision of the surveillance was chilling. "She's a professional," David continued, "trained by some of the best criminal organizations in West Africa. She can kill with her hands, with weapons, with poisons that won't show up in standard autopsies. And she's been planning this homecoming for 25 years. Peter, the mute man, suddenly stepped forward and began signing rapidly. Ibrahim translated for Adani. "He says he found one of her safe houses yesterday. She's been collecting information about all of us, including the men who ordered the original killings. There's a kill list, and it has 23 names on it." 23. Adani felt her stomach drop. How many people were involved in murdering children? "The inner circle was 7 men," Ahmed explained. "Your father, my father, Ibrahim's father, David's father, Peter's father, Folake's first husband before she married your father, and one other, General Abu Bakr, who provided military protection for the operations." "That's only 7, Adani said. "The other 16 are their children, grandchildren, and spouses who might seek revenge if the truth comes out," Ibrahim said grimly. "Zainab believes in permanent solutions." The magnitude of what was planned hit Adani like a tsunami. This wasn't just about revenge against Folake or even the original conspirators. This was about wiping out entire family lines to ensure the secret died with them. "My children," she whispered, thinking of her twin daughters studying at university in London. "Are they on the list?" Ibrahim nodded sadly. "Everyone is on the list, Adani. Everyone who carries the blood of the conspirators. She sees all of us as potentially dangerous to her mission." Chidi, who had been silently standing guard, suddenly tensed. "Someone's coming," he said, his hand moving to his weapon. The sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the warehouse. Multiple engines, moving fast. Ahmed immediately began folding up the map while David and Peter moved to positions that would give them clear sightlines to the entrances. "Police?" Adani asked. Ibrahim shook his head, listening carefully to the engine sounds. "Military. Which means General Abu Bakr knows we're here." The realization struck them all at the same time. If the general knew they were meeting, if he knew they were still alive and working together, then their careful secrecy had been compromised. "It's a trap," David said. "Someone told him where we'd be." Through the dirty windows, they could see military vehicles surrounding the warehouse. Soldiers in combat gear were taking positions, their weapons trained on the building. These weren't regular police coming to arrest them. This was an elimination squad. "There's another way out," Peter signed frantically, and Ibrahim translated. "Through the storm drains that connect to the lagoon. But we have to go now." As if to emphasize his point, a loudspeaker crackled to life outside. "This is General Abu Bakr. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands visible, and you will not be harmed." The lie was obvious in his tone. None of them would leave this warehouse alive if they surrendered. But as they prepared to flee through Peter's escape route, a new sound cut through the air. The distinctive whistle of an incoming projectile, followed by an explosion that rocked the building and sent debris raining down on them. Through the smoke and chaos, a figure in black appeared at one of the blown-out windows. Small, agile, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. Zainab had found them. But instead of attacking, she held up her hands in a gesture of truce. "If you want to live," she called out in a voice that carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, "follow me now." The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted outside as the military forces began their assault on the warehouse. Zainab had apparently arrived just in time to provide them with an alternative to capture or death. Ibrahim looked at Adunni, then at the others. In the space of heartbeats, they had to make a choice. Trust the woman who had planned to kill them all, or face certain death at the hands of General Abubakar's soldiers. "She's our best chance," he said. But as they prepared to follow Zainab into whatever trap or salvation she was offering, Adunni couldn't help wondering if they were just exchanging one form of death for another. The butterfly had spread her wings, and it was time to see whether she would carry them to safety or destruction. This story just keeps getting more intense. What do you think Zainab's real plan is? Comment your theories below, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. The explosion had blown a hole in the warehouse's back wall, and through it, Zainab led them into the maze of industrial pipes and storage tanks that made up Lagos's port district. She moved like smoke, silent and swift, occasionally holding up her hand to signal them to freeze as military searchlights swept overhead. Adunni found herself studying the woman who had once been an innocent child. Zainab was small and wiry, her hair cut short and practical, her dark clothing designed for movement and concealment. But it was her eyes that were most striking. They held depths of calculation and coldness that spoke of things no child should ever have experienced. They reached a drainage canal that led toward the lagoon, and Zainab finally spoke in a whisper that somehow carried clearly to all of them. "The general has kill orders for all of you. He's been tracking your movements for months." "How do you know that?" Ibrahim asked. Zainab smiled, and the expression was more chilling than reassuring. "Because I'm the one who's been feeding him information. I needed him to gather you all in one place." The betrayal hit them like a physical blow. David raised his weapon, but Zainab was faster, producing a knife from somewhere in her clothing and holding it to his throat before he could blink. "I wouldn't," she said calmly. "We're not out of danger yet, and you need me to stay alive." "Why should we trust you?" Adunni demanded. "You've been planning to kill us." "I've been planning to kill the people responsible for destroying my childhood," Zainab corrected. "You're all victims, just like me. But you're also witnesses to what really happened in 1999, which makes you valuable." She released David and sheathed her knife in one fluid motion. "The general thinks I'm eliminating loose ends for him. What he doesn't know is that I've been gathering evidence of his crimes for the past year. Everything he's done, everyone he's ordered killed, every payoff he's arranged. I have it all." Ibrahim stared at her. "You're not just here for revenge. You're here to expose them." "I'm here to end them," Zainab said. "But I need your help to do it right. If I just kill them all, the network will adapt and continue under new leadership. If I expose them publicly and then eliminate them, the whole system collapses." The sound of approaching search helicopters cut through their conversation. Zainab motioned for them to follow her deeper into the drainage system, where the concrete tunnels would provide cover from aerial surveillance. As they moved through the narrow passages, water sloshing around their ankles, Adunni found herself walking beside the woman who had haunted her thoughts since yesterday. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. "After they took you?" Zainab was silent for so long that Adunni thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was devoid of emotion. "They sold me to a man in Benin City who specialized in training girls for special purposes. Not just prostitution, assassination, theft, espionage. I was good at it. Good enough that I earned my freedom after 10 years. And then I spent the next 15 years becoming better at it. Learning from the best killers, the smartest criminals, the most ruthless organizations across Africa. All so I could come home and make them pay." They emerged from the drainage system into a small boatyard where a speedboat was waiting. Zainab had clearly planned every detail of their escape route. As they climbed aboard, Ahmed asked the question they were all thinking. What do you want from us? Zainab started the engine, and the boat roared to life. As they pulled away from shore, with Lagos city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening darkness, she turned to face them all. I want you to help me stage the biggest domestic betrayal exposure in Nigerian history. Tomorrow night, General Abubakar is hosting a private party at his estate in Lekki. All the surviving members of the original conspiracy will be there, along with their current business partners and political allies. She pulled out a tablet and showed them surveillance photos of an elegant mansion surrounded by high walls and security cameras. It's going to be a celebration of their continued success, their untouchability. What they don't know is that it's going to be their confession. David leaned forward to study the images. You're planning to get them to admit to the murders? How? Zainab's smile was sharp as a blade. Fear makes people say things they normally wouldn't. And I've become very good at inspiring fear. This is insane, Peter signed, and Ibrahim translated. You're talking about infiltrating a heavily guarded compound full of the most dangerous men in Nigeria. Actually, Zainab said, I'm talking about walking through the front door as invited guests. She produced a set of elegant invitation cards from her jacket. You're all successful businesspeople now. You have legitimate reasons to be at a high society gathering. And while you're there making small talk, I'll be in the background, recording everything and preparing for the final phase. Adunni took one of the invitations, noting that it was addressed to her real name and business title. How did you get these? I have my methods, Zainab said evasively. The question is, are you willing to use them? The boat was heading toward a small island in Lagos Lagoon, where lights indicated some kind of structure. Their temporary sanctuary, Adunni assumed. But she was less concerned about where they were going than about what Zainab was asking them to do. You want us to walk into a room full of people who tried to have us murdered, she said slowly, and help you terrorize them into confessing. I want you to help me get justice for 12 dead children, Zainab corrected. Including the child each of you used to be before they tried to kill you. The boat pulled up to a small dock, and they could see that the island housed what appeared to be an abandoned research station. Zainab had clearly been preparing this base of operations for some time. As they walked toward the main building, Ibrahim fell into step beside Adunni. Are we really going to do this? He asked quietly. Adunni thought about her father, about the man she had loved and mourned for 25 years, who had apparently been part of a conspiracy that murdered children to protect criminal profits. She thought about Folake, dying slowly from Zainab's poison but still plotting to claim more victims. She thought about her own daughters, safe in London but potentially targets if this network decided they were threats. Yes, she said finally. We're going to do this. But as they entered the research station and began planning for what might be the most dangerous night of their lives, Adunni couldn't shake the feeling that Zainab was still keeping secrets. The woman who had survived 25 years as a professional killer wasn't someone who revealed all her cards at once. The question was, would those hidden cards save them all, or destroy them? What do you think is going to happen at that party? Are you rooting for Zainab's revenge? Or do you think she's gone too far? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to share this story with someone who loves a good thriller. The research station had been abandoned for years, but Zainab had transformed it into a sophisticated operations center. Banks of computers hummed quietly in the main room, their screens displaying surveillance feeds from across Lagos. Maps covered the walls, marked with red pins indicating the locations of their targets. It was the nerve center of a campaign that had been years in the planning. Impressive, David said, examining the setup. How long have you been preparing this? 5 years of active preparation, Zainab replied, pulling up files on one of the computers. 20 years of thinking about it. She began displaying photographs and documents on the main screen. Financial records, bank statements, recorded phone conversations, even videos of meetings that should have been private. The scope of her intelligence gathering was breathtaking. "This is General Abu Bakar's current operation," she explained, pointing to a flow chart showing money movements between various accounts. Human trafficking, drug running, illegal mining, arms dealing. Everything your fathers were involved in back then, but on a much larger scale. Ahmed whistled low. He's built an empire on the foundation of those original crimes. And every year, he gets stronger and more untouchable, Zainab continued. The politicians protect him, the police work for him, the military answers to him. He's become the shadow ruler of half of West Africa. Adani studied the financial records, her business training helping her understand the intricate web of shell companies and offshore accounts. This is billions of dollars we're talking about. Which is why simply exposing him won't work, Zainab said. Men with this much money can buy their way out of any scandal. They can discredit witnesses, bribe judges, even arrange accidents for prosecutors. The only way to stop them permanently is to remove them from the board entirely. Ibrahim had been quiet, studying the surveillance feeds from the general's estate. "You've been watching them for a long time," he observed. "These cameras show months of recorded data." Zainab nodded. "I needed to understand their patterns, their security protocols, their relationships with each other. Tomorrow night's party is perfect because it's a celebration of a new arms deal with a West African rebel group. They'll all be there, all the original conspirators and their current associates." She pulled up a guest list on the screen. 23 names, just as Ibrahim had said. Some Adani recognized from her childhood, friends of her father who had bounced her on their knees and given her presents on her birthday. Others were new faces, younger men who had inherited their father's criminal enterprises. "The plan is simple," Zainab continued. "You 5 attend the party as legitimate businesspeople. I'll be there too, but not as a guest. I've arranged to be hired as part of the catering staff." Peter signed something, and Ibrahim translated. "He wants to know what happens after we get inside." Zainab's expression hardened. At exactly midnight, the lights go out. Emergency power comes on 30 seconds later, but by then, I'll have secured the main room and all the exits. Then we have a conversation about the past. "A conversation that involves them confessing to murder," David said. "Among other things." Zainab pulled up another file, this one containing audio recordings. "I've already gotten partial confessions from 3 of them over the past 6 months. Men tend to talk when they think they're about to die." She played a brief excerpt of one recording. General Abu Bakar's voice was unmistakable, discussing the need to clean up loose ends from the 1999 operations. The casual way he talked about murdering children was chilling. "How did you get this?" Adani asked. "I've been working as a freelance assassin for the past 15 years, Zainab replied matter-of-factly. "Some of my clients have been these men, hiring me to eliminate their rivals. They trust me because I've been effective and discreet. They have no idea who I really am." The implications of what she was saying sank in slowly. "You've been killing people for them?" "I've been killing their enemies," Zainab corrected. "Other criminals, corrupt politicians, business rivals, people who probably deserved to die anyway. And in the process, I've gained their complete trust." Ahmed shook his head in amazement. "You've been playing a 25-year-long game." "Exactly. And tomorrow night is the endgame." As they spent the rest of the evening going over the plan, Adani found herself both impressed and disturbed by the woman Zainab had become. Her intelligence was formidable, her planning meticulous, her determination absolute. But there was something missing in her that Adani couldn't quite identify. Some essential humanity that had been carved out by 25 years of violence and revenge. Late that night, as the others slept in the station's dormitory, Adani found Zainab on the observation deck, staring out at the lights of Lagos across the water. "Do you ever think about what happens after?" Adunni asked, joining her at the railing. "After what?" "After tomorrow night. After you've gotten your revenge. What do you do then?" Zainab was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than Adunni had heard it before. "I don't think there is an after. I've been dead for 25 years, Adunni. Tomorrow night isn't about getting my life back. It's about making sure their deaths mean something." "You're planning to die tomorrow?" "I'm planning to finish what they started when they took me from my family." Zainab turned to look at her, and for just a moment, Adunni caught a glimpse of the frightened child who had been stolen all those years ago. "But I need to know that you and the others will survive. That someone will be left to tell the story." The weight of what Zainab was asking settled on Adunni's shoulders. She wasn't just planning revenge. She was planning a sacrifice. Her own life in exchange for the truth about what had happened to 12 murdered children. "There has to be another way," Adunni said. Zainab smiled sadly. "I've spent 25 years looking for another way. This is the only one that works." As dawn began to break over Lagos Lagoon, painting the water in shades of gold and pink, Adunni realized that tomorrow night wasn't just about confronting the past. It was about deciding what kind of future they wanted to build from the ashes of their childhood traumas. The butterfly was ready to burn, but she intended to take her enemies with her. The final confrontation was less than 24 hours away, and Adunni still wasn't sure if they would be witnessing justice or just another tragedy. The morning of the party dawned gray and humid, with the kind of heavy air that promised thunderstorms by evening. Adunni stood in her walk-in closet, selecting the perfect outfit for what might be the most dangerous night of her life. She chose a midnight blue evening gown by a South African designer, elegant enough for high society, but with a cut that would allow for quick movement if necessary. Her phone buzzed with a message from Zainab. "Final preparations complete. Remember, act natural, follow the plan, and trust no one except each other." Ibrahim had arranged to pick her up at 7 p.m., and they would arrive at the general's estate together as business associates. David and Ahmed were coming separately, playing the role of potential investors. Peter would be positioned outside the compound with surveillance equipment, their eyes and ears from beyond the walls. As Adunni applied her makeup, she found herself thinking about her daughters in London. She had called them the night before, just to hear their voices, without revealing the danger she was walking into. If something went wrong tonight, they would never know the truth about their grandfather or the family legacy they had inherited. At exactly 7 p.m., Ibrahim's car pulled up to her building. He looked elegant in a tailored tuxedo, every inch the successful businessman. Only the slight tension around his eyes betrayed the weight of what they were about to attempt. "Any word from the others?" Adunni asked as they drove through Lagos traffic. "David and Ahmed are already on their way. Peter is in position with the surveillance equipment." Ibrahim checked his watch. Zainab should be inside by now, setting up the final elements. The general's estate in Lekki was a monument to stolen wealth. High walls topped with razor wire surrounded landscaped gardens, and armed guards were stationed at regular intervals. As their car approached the main gate, Adunni felt her heart rate increase. Once they were inside those walls, there would be no easy escape. The security check was thorough but routine. Their invitations were verified, they were scanned for weapons, and their names were checked against a guest list. Adunni held her breath as the guard examined her invitation, but it passed inspection without comment. Zainab's forgeries were perfect. The main house was a sprawling mansion in the neoclassical style, its white columns and marble facade designed to impress and intimidate. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Nigeria's elite mingled in the grand ballroom, champagne glasses in hand, discussing business deals and political maneuvering that would shape the country's future. Adunni recognized several faces from her research: politicians, military officers, business leaders who formed the network that had murdered children to protect their interests. They looked so normal, so civilized in their evening wear. It was hard to believe these people were capable of such monstrous acts. "There's folktale," Ibrahim murmured, nodding toward a corner where Adunni's stepmother sat in a wheelchair, looking frail but still elegantly dressed. "Zainab's poison is working faster than expected." Indeed, folktale looked terrible. Her skin had a grayish pallor, and her hands shook as she lifted her champagne glass. But her eyes were still sharp, still calculating. Even dying, she was watching everything, looking for opportunities and threats. General Abubakar himself was holding court near the main staircase, surrounded by admirers and supplicants. He was a large man in his 70s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. His military uniform was covered in medals, and his presence dominated the room like a black hole consuming light. "Adunni Bakr," a voice said behind her. She turned to find Chief Ademola, one of her father's old business partners, approaching with a warm smile. "I heard you had returned to Lagos. Your father would be so proud of what you've accomplished." The irony of his words was almost unbearable. This man had helped order her father's murder and then tried to have her killed as well. Now he was praising her success as if he were a proud family friend. "Thank you, Chief," she replied, forcing a smile. "It's good to see familiar faces from the old days." Indeed, indeed. Those were simpler times, weren't they? Before all the unpleasantness. Before the murder of children, he meant. Adunni nodded and excused herself, moving deeper into the crowd. She needed to find David and Ahmed, to make sure everyone was in position for midnight. As she circulated through the party, making small talk and accepting congratulations on her business success, Adunni kept an eye out for Zainab among the catering staff. She spotted her once, carrying a tray of champagne glasses, her hair covered by a server's cap. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and Zainab gave an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was proceeding according to plan. At 11:30, the general called for attention and made a toast to continuing prosperity and lasting friendships. The irony wasn't lost on Adunni. These men were toasting their success at literal murder and exploitation, surrounded by the wealth they had stolen from the people of Nigeria. As midnight approached, Adunni positioned herself near one of the main exits, as Zainab had instructed. Ibrahim was across the room, David was near the bar, and Ahmed was close to the general himself. They were all in place. At exactly midnight, the lights went out. For a moment, there was only confused murmuring from the guests. Then the emergency lighting came on, casting eerie shadows across the ballroom. And in that dim red light, they saw her. Zainab stood on the main staircase, no longer disguised as a server. She wore all black, and in her hands were two automatic weapons. Behind her, the exits were blocked by what appeared to be explosive devices. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent room. "My name is Zainab Musa, and I've been looking forward to this reunion for 25 years. The reaction was immediate and electric. General Abubakar's face went pale as he recognized the name. Several other men in the crowd began reaching for their phones or weapons, but Zainab's voice stopped them cold. "I wouldn't," she said calmly. "The doors are sealed, the phones are jammed, and my associates have disabled your security systems. We're going to have a little chat about the past." The transformation in the room was instant. These powerful men, accustomed to commanding others, suddenly found themselves at the mercy of a woman they had tried to murder as a child. Some tried to maintain their composure, others looked around desperately for escape routes that no longer existed. "You're all wondering how I survived," Zainab continued, moving down the stairs with predatory grace. "How the little girl you sold to traffickers managed to come back from the dead. Well, let me show you." She pulled out a tablet and projected images onto the wall behind her. Photos of the 12 murdered children appeared one by one, their smiling faces a stark contrast to the fear now filling the ballroom. Kemi Adebola, drowned at age 16 after discovering her father's money laundering operation. The first photo glowed on the wall as Zainab's voice took on the tone of a prosecutor reading charges. Tund Fashola, poisoned at age 15 for asking too many questions about illegal mining contracts. Another photo appeared. Son Ogundimu, killed in a car accident at 21 for threatening to expose the arms-dealing network. One by one, she named them all, their faces staring down at the men who had ordered their deaths. When she reached the final photo, her own school picture, the silence in the room was absolute. And Zainab Musa, sold to human traffickers at age 14 rather than killed outright, because General Abubakar thought she might be more valuable alive. All eyes turned to the general, who was sweating despite the air conditioning. "This is preposterous," he blustered. "I don't know what you're talking about." Zainab smiled and played an audio recording. The general's own voice filled the room, discussing the disposal of problem children with clinical detachment. The conversation was clearly from decades ago, but the words were damning. That could be doctored," he stammered. "Could it?" Zainab played another recording, this one more recent. The general's voice discussing plans to eliminate Adani and the other survivors. "This one is from last month. Would you like to hear more?" Folake, still in her wheelchair, suddenly laughed. The sound was bitter and filled with madness. "You think you're so clever, little butterfly. But you don't know everything." Zainab's attention turned to her stepmother. "Please, enlighten us." "Tell them about your training," Folake said, her voice growing stronger with malicious glee. "Tell them what you became while you were gone." For the first time since the lights had gone out, Zainab looked uncertain. Adani felt a chill of foreboding. "I became what I needed to become to survive," Zainab said carefully. "You became a monster." Folake shrieked, struggling to rise from her wheelchair. "Show them your kill list, butterfly. Show them the innocent people you murdered to get close to us." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Around the room, Adani could see confusion and doubt creeping into people's faces. The narrative was shifting, and not in their favor. "That's different," Zainab said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Those were criminals, people who deserved to die." General Abubakar had found his voice again, seizing the opening Folake had provided. "You're a hired killer, just like us. The only difference is we never pretended to be righteous about it." The psychological warfare was working. Zainab's carefully planned revelation was being turned against her, her moral authority undermined by her own actions over the past 25 years. But then Ibrahim stepped forward from his position near the wall. "She's right about one thing," he said loudly. "We're all killers here. But there's a difference between killing for money and killing for justice." David and Ahmed moved to support him, forming a small group that stood with Zainab against the rest of the room. Adani realized this was the moment of choice: stand with the survivors seeking justice, or let the murderers regain control of the narrative. She stepped forward to join them. "My father was part of your conspiracy," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "He helped murder children to protect his criminal empire. And you killed him when he tried to back out." The admission cost her everything: her idealized memory of her father, her sense of family honor, her carefully constructed identity as a successful businesswoman seeking simple revenge. But it also freed her to stand for something larger than personal grudges. "We're not here for revenge," she continued. "We're here for justice. For 12 dead children who never got to grow up, never got to have families of their own, never got to contribute to the world because you decided your profits were more important than their lives." The room was dividing along clear lines now. On one side, the survivors and their allies. On the other, the aging conspirators and their current associates. The moral battle lines were drawn. But Zainab wasn't finished. She produced another device from her jacket, a small radio transmitter. "While we've been talking," she said, "everything you've said has been broadcast live to every major news station in West Africa. Your confessions, your attempts to justify child murder, your threats, all of it is being heard by millions of people." The impact was immediate and devastating. These men had built their power on secrecy and deniability. Public exposure was their worst nightmare. General Abubakar snarled and lunged toward her, but Zainab was ready. The confrontation they had all been building toward was finally about to begin. But as the general charged forward, Adunni noticed something that made her blood freeze. Folake had produced a small device from her purse, the detonator for explosives that weren't part of Zainab's plan. Her stepmother's final revenge was about to kill them all. The climax is here. Will anyone survive Folake's final betrayal? What do you think happens next? Comment below with your predictions. Everyone down. Adunni screamed, but her warning was lost in the chaos as General Abubakar reached Zainab and they crashed to the marble floor together. Folake's finger was moving toward the detonator button when Ibrahim tackled her wheelchair, sending both the device and her stepmother tumbling across the floor. The detonator skidded under a serving table as explosions began to rock the building. Not from Folake's device, but from somewhere outside the mansion. Through the tall windows, they could see military vehicles surrounding the estate, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. But these weren't the general's loyal troops. The uniforms were different, and they were moving with the precision of a hostile takeover. "What's happening?" David shouted over the noise of automatic weapons fire from the grounds. Zainab, who had managed to pin the general despite his size advantage, looked up with grim satisfaction. "Insurance policy," she panted. "I may have mentioned this gathering to certain international authorities who've been looking for an excuse to clean house in Nigerian politics." The realization hit everyone at once. This wasn't just a revenge plot or a confession session. It was a carefully orchestrated raid designed to decapitate the entire criminal network at once. Zainab had been working with outside forces, possibly international law enforcement or intelligence agencies. "You little bitch," the general snarled, trying to throw her off. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." "Actually, I know exactly what I've unleashed," Zainab replied, producing a pair of zip-tie handcuffs from somewhere and securing his wrists behind his back. "The end of your organization." But Folake wasn't finished. Despite Ibrahim's tackle, she had managed to crawl toward the detonator, her dying body driven by pure malice. "If I'm going to die," she gasped, "I'm taking all of you with me." Her hand closed on the device just as Ahmed dove to stop her. The struggle was brief but vicious, with Folake fighting like a wounded animal. But the poison Zainab had been feeding her for months had weakened her too much. Ahmed wrestled the detonator away and threw it across the room, where it shattered against a marble column. The immediate threat neutralized, they all became aware of new sounds from outside. Helicopters were landing, and authoritative voices were shouting commands in English and French. This was a joint international operation, and it was massive. "How long have you been planning this?" Adunni asked Zainab, who was now methodically restraining other prominent figures in the room with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. 7 years of active coordination with Interpol, the FBI, French intelligence, and British authorities, Zainab replied without looking up from her work. "It turns out that when you can provide detailed intelligence on one of Africa's largest criminal networks, people are very interested in what you have to say." The main doors burst open, and armed officers in tactical gear poured into the ballroom. Their leader, a tall woman with short gray hair and the bearing of seasoned authority, surveyed the scene with professional satisfaction. "Ms. Musa," she said, approaching Zainab. "Excellent work. We have the entire compound secured, And our teams are arresting associates at 17 different locations across West Africa as we speak. Inspector Johnson, Zainab replied, standing and removing her gloves. I believe you'll find everything exactly as I described in my reports. The scope of the operation was breathtaking. This wasn't just about revenge for murdered children. It was the culmination of the largest organized crime investigation in West African history. And Zainab had been an undercover asset for years, using her position as a trusted assassin to gather intelligence on the entire network. What about us? Ibrahim asked, gesturing to himself, Adani, David, and Ahmed. Are we under arrest too? Inspector Johnson consulted a tablet. You're all listed as protected witnesses and victims. You'll need to give statements, of course, but you're not targets of this investigation. As the international officers began processing the arrested conspirators, Adani found herself standing alone with Zainab for the first time since the operation began. The woman who had seemed so cold and calculating earlier now looked exhausted, as if a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. You were never planning to die tonight, were you? Adani asked. Zainab smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. I thought about it. For 25 years, I thought death was the only way this could end. But then I realized something. What? Living well really is the best revenge. Destroying them and walking away to build a new life. That's the ultimate victory. As if to emphasize her point, she began removing weapons and surveillance equipment from various places on her body, transforming from a dangerous operative back into something approaching a normal woman. What happens now? Adani asked. Now we testify. We make sure they go to prison for the rest of their lives. We help the authorities trace all the money they stole and return it to the people they robbed. We build something better from the ashes of what they destroyed. Folake was being loaded onto a stretcher, the poison finally overwhelming her system. As they carried her past, she looked up at Adani with eyes full of hatred and madness. This isn't over, she whispered. There are others. People you don't know about. They'll come for you. But her words no longer carried the power to frighten. The network was broken, its leaders in custody, its secrets exposed to the world. Whatever threats remained would be dealt with by legitimate authorities, not by traumatized children seeking revenge in the darkness. Inspector Johnson approached them with a thick folder. There's going to be a lot of paperwork, she warned. Trials, testimony, asset recovery proceedings. This case will probably take years to fully resolve. We'll be there, Ibrahim said, speaking for all of them. Whatever you need. As dawn broke over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the survivors of 1999 found themselves standing together on the mansion's front steps. The nightmare that had defined their lives for 25 years was finally over. What do we do now? David asked. We've spent so long focused on this moment, I'm not sure what comes next. Adani looked at each of them, Ibrahim with his quiet strength, Ahmed with his analytical mind, David with his determination, and Zainab with her hard-won wisdom. They had been bound together by tragedy, but now they could choose to be bound together by something better. We live, she said simply. We heal. We help other survivors. We make sure nothing like this ever happens again. But even as she spoke the words, Adani couldn't shake the feeling that Folake's final threat hadn't been empty bluster. Somewhere out there, other networks, other conspiracies, other people who profited from the suffering of the innocent were watching this operation and learning from it. The immediate danger was over, but the fight for justice was far from finished. Just when you think it's over. What do you think Folake meant about others? The story isn't done yet. Make sure you're subscribed for the final chapter. 3 months later, Adani stood in the garden of her new home in the hills outside Abuja, watching her daughters play with Ibrahim's children. The international trials had concluded faster than anyone expected, with most of the conspirators accepting plea bargains when faced with overwhelming evidence. General Abu Bakr had received life in prison without parole. The others had gotten sentences ranging from 25 years to life. Folake had died in custody 2 weeks after the raid, the poison finally claiming her life. Her final words, according to the prison medical staff, had been a warning about the Northern Network and the children who got away. Even in death, she had been trying to sow fear and chaos. But life had a way of moving forward, despite the shadows of the past. Adunni's business empire had survived the scandal. In fact, her reputation as someone who had fought corruption and won had actually enhanced her standing in the international business community. She was now using her wealth and influence to fund organizations that fought human trafficking and helped survivors of childhood trauma. Zainab lived in a cottage on the same compound, slowly learning how to exist in a world where she didn't need to constantly look over her shoulder for threats. The transition from professional killer to civilian wasn't easy, but she was working with therapists and making progress. Most importantly, she had reconnected with Ibrahim, the brother who had never stopped searching for her. The sound of a car approaching broke Adunni's peaceful contemplation. She looked up to see Inspector Johnson's familiar vehicle coming up the drive. This was unexpected. The International Task Force had officially concluded their operation, and most of the foreign officers had returned to their home countries. "Inspector," Adunni said, walking out to meet her. "This is a surprise." Inspector Johnson looked tired and grim. "I'm afraid I have some concerning news. We've been monitoring communications from the surviving members of the network, and there's been activity." They walked toward the main house, where Ibrahim and Zainab were helping prepare lunch. When they saw Inspector Johnson's expression, the celebratory mood quickly shifted to concern. "What kind of activity?" Zainab asked, immediately falling back into her operational mindset. "Remember Folake's warnings about other networks? It appears she wasn't just trying to frighten you. Our intelligence analysts have identified what they're calling the Northern Alliance, a separate but connected criminal organization based primarily in Kano and Kaduna." Inspector Johnson pulled out a tablet and showed them surveillance photos of men in expensive suits meeting in what appeared to be a private club. "These are the people who took over the trafficking operations when the Lagos network was focused on political corruption and money laundering. They've been operating independently for years, but they're connected by family ties and shared interests." Adunni studied the faces, looking for anyone she might recognize from her childhood. One man in particular caught her attention. He was younger than the others, probably in his 40s, with a kind of predatory confidence she had learned to associate with dangerous men. "Who is he?" she asked, pointing to the image. "Sonny Bello. Ahmed's cousin, as it turns out. He's been running the Northern operations since 2005, and he's apparently very unhappy about what happened to his Southern colleagues." Ahmed, who had been listening quietly, suddenly went pale. "Sonny was always the worst of our family," he said quietly. "Even as children, he enjoyed hurting people and animals. My father tried to keep me away from him, but now he sees you as a traitor who helped destroy his business partners," Inspector Johnson finished. "Our sources indicate he's planning some kind of retaliation." The weight of unfinished business settled over them like a storm cloud. Just when they thought they were free of the past, another tentacle of the same corrupt system was reaching out to drag them back into darkness. "What do they want?" Ibrahim asked. "Revenge, primarily, but also to send a message to anyone else who might consider cooperating with international law enforcement. They want to make an example of you." Zainab stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the peaceful garden where children were still playing, unaware of the adult world's capacity for evil. "How long do we have?" "Our intelligence suggests they're planning something within the next few weeks. Possibly coordinated attacks on all of you simultaneously." The familiar feeling of being hunted settled over Adunni like an old, unwelcome coat. She had thought those days were behind her, that her daughters could grow up without looking over their shoulders. But apparently, some battles never truly ended. "What are our options?" she asked. Inspector Johnson looked uncomfortable. "Officially, I'm here to offer you protective custody and relocation services. New identities, new lives in countries where these people can't reach you." "And unofficially?" "Unofficially, I'm here to tell you that Zainab isn't the only one who's been working with international law enforcement. We have assets positioned throughout the Northern Network, and we've been building a case against them for 2 years. If you're willing to help us complete the operation." The unspoken invitation hung in the air. Another conspiracy, another network of child killers and human traffickers, another opportunity to choose between safety and justice. Adani looked around at her family, biological and chosen. Ibrahim, who had never stopped fighting for his sister. Ahmed, who was confronting the evil in his own bloodline. David, who had built a new life from the ashes of trauma. Zainab, who had transformed from victim to victor. And her own daughters, playing innocently in the garden, representing the future they were all fighting to protect. "What do you need from us?" she asked. Inspector Johnson smiled, and it was a predator's expression. "We need you to do what you do best. We need you to walk into their stronghold and make them underestimate you, just long enough for us to bring the whole structure down." As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the room, Adani realized that her story wasn't ending. It was evolving. The little girl who had been pushed into the river 25 years ago was gone forever, but the woman who had emerged from those dark waters was just getting started. The Northern Network thought they were hunting wounded survivors. Instead, they were about to discover what happened when victims refused to stay victims, when trauma became strength, and when the powerless learned to wield power with precision and purpose. "When do we start?" she asked. Inspector Johnson's smile widened. "How about tomorrow?" Outside, the children's laughter continued to echo through the garden, a sound of hope and resilience that would outlast all the darkness the adult world could conjure. The fight for justice never truly ended, but neither did the capacity for healing, growth, and the kind of love that could transform even the deepest wounds into sources of strength. The river had tried to drown her once, but Adani had learned to swim in deeper and more dangerous waters, and she was ready to dive in again. The butterfly's wings had healed, and she was ready to fly once more. What an incredible journey! Did you expect this twist ending? The fight for justice continues. If you loved this story of revenge, resilience, and the power of survivors working together, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping African stories. Share this with someone who believes in standing up to corruption and fighting for the innocent. What story should we tell next? Comment below with your suggestions, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Thank you for joining Adani, Zainab, and the other survivors on this emotional roller coaster. Your support means everything to storytellers like us.